what's going on, everybody? My name is Julian Leonard. I'm the owner of the J Leonard Group, also known as the J Leonard Public Speaking and Coaching Group. Today I'm going to do a question and answer session that will be focused on answering questions that you sent in regarding public speaking. Now, some of these questions I've gone over and some I haven't, but today I have 5 that I'm going to answer. If you're new to this program, for 2020, I've set out to release 52 public speaking tips, which equates to 1 per week, and they're going to cover all things public speaking. Last week I released my 10th public speaking tip, so 42 more to go. But enough of that, let's jump into your questions. Question number 1. How can I design my PowerPoint slides to where they can help me not forget points when I'm speaking? Before I answer this question, I must say nothing, absolutely nothing will work for you if you don't practice your speech beforehand. Practice, practice, practice. And for reference, if you're preparing a 45-minute keynote, you should practice at least 5 to 10 hours. If you're preparing a quick 15-minute talk, you should practice at minimum 2 to 4 hours. The more you practice, the easier it will become to deliver your message. You can have a well put together PowerPoint and all your information put together, but if you don't practice beforehand, you will be one of the speakers that has their back turned to the audience for the majority of your talk while reading your slides word for word, and that's simply boring. But to answer your question, approach designing your PowerPoint slides by setting the goal of not trying to overwhelm your audience. I've been witness to many presentations that contain too much information, maybe multiple pictures on a slide and then 6 bullet points on another. You have to think as if your audience has no relationship to the information you're going to present. So if they're totally new to this, then why would you bombard them with too much information? You wouldn't do that, would you? It's so easy to get caught up in delivering so much information, but don't be the speaker who does that. It's okay to break out your information, expand it. For example, when I speak, I'm usually only putting 1 item on a slide. So what could be a 7-slide presentation may turn out to be a 12-slide presentation. But guess what? My audience can remember what it is that I'm trying to relate to them, and that's the key. So in the end, don't overwhelm your audience and don't overwhelm yourself. Question number 2. What's the use of timing your speech when practicing? When you do it live, anything can happen that can affect the amount of time in which you deliver your speech. Hope that makes sense. This is interesting because, in all honesty, you answered your question. The purpose of timing your speech when practicing beforehand is to find out what is the ballpark range you can deliver your message in the clearest, most efficient way possible. When you're on stage, you can't speak forever. Event organizers will make sure that you know what your time limit is. If you come in too far under or go too far over, that's a bad thing. That's a huge no-no. It's easy to practice and deliver a speech at home or around people you trust versus delivering it in front of a room of complete strangers. Many things can affect your delivery, which in return can affect the amount of time it takes for you to deliver your talk. You may get extra nervous in the moment. You may include audience interaction in the moment by asking questions. There may be a big distraction, and many things can occur. It's best to have a very good estimate of how much time you will take up. Let me give you an example. When I'm practicing my Toastmaster speeches, the official time limit is always between 5 and 7 minutes. When I'm by myself, I'm usually taking up around 4.5 minutes. But when I get in front of people, I usually talk between 6.5 and 7.5 minutes always. That's because I pause when I'm in the moment. I try to include the audience. I'm walking around the room. Those are all elements that almost always naturally happens and therefore makes me take up more time. But in my mind, I always know how to alter my talk in the moment if I recognize that I'm taking up too much time. So I always suggest time your speech. And that may mean that you have to do your speech 5 times just to get the best estimate of how much time you take up, because I almost always guarantee it won't be the same amount of time when you're live and in a moment. So trust me, time yourself when you're practicing. It's one of the best things you can do. Question number 3. Do you suggest presenting in a different format instead of the standard format you suggested? It seems too normal. The standard format you're referring to is the introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. The reason I suggested this is because it's usually the easiest way for you to stay organized and really helps the audience follow along. Now, if you look at a lot of seasoned speakers, we'll use TEDx speakers, for example. They may start off with a story. Others may start off with a climax or with the ending in mind. But really, it's about what are you most comfortable with? What are you most comfortable with? And whatever you practice should be what you execute on stage. If you don't like the standard format, that's fine. It's okay to be creative, but don't switch up your flow at the last minute. That's the best thing I can say with that. Question number 4. I network a lot, usually 10 to 15 events a month. I'm comfortable networking, but I'm still timid about speaking in front of people. Any tips on using networking to practice for public speaking? I personally network at least 4 to 5 times a month. For me, both speaking and networking gives me a thrill. It's something about introducing yourself to a stranger or multiple strangers and seeing if you can keep their attention, if they're listening with intent. It's also interesting to see what you have in common with others. I would say if you're comfortable networking, then you're basically halfway there. Sounds like you already know how to work a room. Sounds like you are comfortable with introducing yourself to others. Those are two of the same exact elements that speakers have to employ when on the stage. Networking events can be harder to navigate than the stage. Sometimes I'm at an event with 300 people and I usually have to introduce myself to multiple people. It can be tiring, it can be frustrating, but it builds up that confidence, it builds up that courage. And if you're able to network right now, then you're already halfway there. If you feel you're not ready to be a public speaker, then keep up the networking. And I believe you'll eventually make it to the stage. And the last question. Question number 5. I like what you said about using index cards for notes instead of sheets of paper. Can you go more in depth about how to approach the use of index cards? Honestly, I will approach the use of index cards when speaking the same way I would approach designing PowerPoint slides, which I referenced in question number 1. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't put too much information on one index card. It's okay to spread it out. So let's think about it. You just finished your introduction, you got through your first point, but you don't quite remember your second point. You have an index card in front of you and you can glance down. Now let's take a few seconds to think about what the best situation for you would be in that moment. Would it be for you to look down at your index cards and see 3 bullet points referencing what you should say next? Or could it be a few words, a quote, or even a picture that will set off the light bulb in your mind and allow you to easily transition into your next point? What in the moment, and I'm talking about a moment where you're nervous, when the light shines the brightest, what in that particular moment would be easy for you to comprehend in a split second and deliver? Ultimately, be conscious about the amount of the information you put on the index cards. Plus, once again, if you put in the hours in practice, you won't need a lot of information to remind you what to say next. And that's it for the day. Those are 5 specific questions that I answered. If you haven't already, please check out the public speaking tips I released. Like I said, last week I released my 10th episode and next week I'll release my 11th. If you had any questions regarding public speaking, I'm your go-to guy. I'll be happy to help you. You can find me at www.thejleonardgroup.com, through email at contact@thejleonardgroup. And you can also find me on LinkedIn as Julian Leonard. Until next week, my name is Julian Leonard, and this question and answer session was brought to you by the J. Leonard Group.